Meet the Glory Stompers. Stomping for glory. Loving for glory. Fighting for glory. They're the toughest sickle gang that ever laughed at death. The Glory Stompers, in color.
We're not talking about actors. We mean a real monster.
I brought her back. She'll live and I'll get her another body.
I know they're gonna catch me, but don't let anyone see me like that. Please, Doctor, help me!
Biologically speaking, it's of primary importance that man should want to mate. Hey, that
You don't get all your kicks from surfing, do you?
We want to be free to ride our machines without being hassled by the man. And we want to get loaded.
You think you're gonna make a slave of the world? I'll see you in hell first!
The American International Podcast.
Are you ready?
Welcome to the American International Podcast. I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And I'm Jeff Markin.
And this week we're going to get our motors running and head out on the highway with the Glory Stompers from 1967.
The Glory Stompers was directed by Anthony M. Lanza, written by James Gordon White and John Lawrence, and produced by John Lawrence and Maurice Smith for Norman T. Herman Productions.
The Glory Stompers stars Dennis Hopper as Chino, Jody McCrea as Darryl, Chris Noel as Chris, Jock Mahoney as Smiley, Lindsay Crosby as Monk, Casey Kasem as Mouth, Jim Reeder as Paul, Saundra Gayle as Joanne, Robert Tessier as Magoo, Astrid Warner as Doreen, and Gary Wood as Pony.
The film opens with kind of a montage of motorcycles and dancing. The song The Stompers Ride plays. It's kind of reminiscent of the theme from The Wild Angels, also by Davy Allen and the Arrows.
So as the credits roll by in Comic Sans font, you see debauchery, dancing, boobs, motorcycles riding in circles, and then Jody McCrea in a cowboy hat walks up to his girl and hands her a beer. This is Darryl, also known as Cowboy, thus the hat, and unlikely as it is, he's in a motorcycle gang. One of Cowboy's fellow gang members, Pony, encourages him to dance. And though we don't find out right away, this gang is called the Glory Stompers.
So this party is for Chris, Cowboy's girl, but it's about to be crashed as Dennis Hopper and his Black Souls ride up. And Dennis Hopper's character is Chino. He's not playing himself.
Or is he?
Chris is concerned about these new arrivals, but Cowboy says it's okay and to keep the party going. Joanne, Chino's girl, looks on uncomfortably as Chino says hey to every girl in his path. And eventually, he makes his way to Chris.
He hey babies her, but she's not interested.
Chris tries to leave, but Chino tells her he only wanted to dance with her, man.
Meanwhile, Darryl is only concerned with playing Chris's favorite song on the jukebox. But when he sees Chino manhandling his gal, he goes over to the two and mildly rebukes Chino for touching his old lady. Chino gripes that he didn't have to get rough with him. He didn't. He just had to say that she was taken. Cowboy says, just don't touch her again.
And if Chino touches her again, he'll kill him. This guy is obviously suicidal, man. Let's split, man. As they begin to part, Mouth, a bearded Casey Kasem, mouths I love you to Pony. As the Black Souls ride up, Chris says she wants to talk to Darryl in private. Cowboy reminds her that the party is for her, but he gives in to her puppy dog eyes.
So they remove themselves from the protection of the group and ride off alone. As they ride off, they're spotted by the Black Souls. Now we're at a secluded location next to a river. Looks like some kind of park, maybe? Darryl and Chris have time to go for a walk before anything happens. Chris wants to have a serious talk. She loves him, but she wants more out of life than riding behind an aimless drifter and his band of overage delinquents. Darryl says she doesn't understand. They're his friends. They're like family, even. They live that way because they avoid the 9-to-5, hassles, hang-ups, etc. They're free. They can go where they want, do what they want. All they need is a bike, a blanket, and the world.
Chris wants Darryl to see that this is an unrealistic view of the world, but he just wishes that she could see things his way. Just then, the Black Souls ride up and start circling Cowboy and Chris, like sharks in a feeding frenzy. A couple of souls, Joanne and Paul, grab Chris, while the other three are pounding on Cowboy. Magoo, who is the biggest of the Black Souls, removes a part from Cowboy's bike, which he uses to bash Cowboy over the head. Cowboy goes down. Look at his face! Chino bends down to inspect Cowboy. Magoo, you snuffed him! Chris breaks free and runs to Cowboy. The souls huddled together to discuss how to handle this latest development.
Yeah, this leaves them with a big problem. What to do with Chris? She could bring the heat down on them after all. Chino says they have to take her with them. This idea doesn't go over well with any of them. That's kidnapping, says the best looking of the five, who we'll later find out is Paul, aka Clean Cut. He thinks that'll bring the heat down on them. And murder won't, asks Chino.
So since Chris is their only witness, they'll take Chris with them and just leave the body here, because no one will ever come up to this idyllic picnic spot and find it.
Nope.
They could take Chris down to Mexico, sell her, and make a little money out of the deal. Mouth asks what if someone were to come looking for her, and Chino motions around him. Who would ever come around here? Besides, he's the only one who saw them.
That decided, it's time to break the news to Chris, who is still sobbing breathily over Cowboy's inert form. She doesn't take it well, naturally. Chino tells her to comply and literally drags her by the hair to his bike. She fights him and he throws her to the ground. He grabs his gun and points it at her and then calls over Magoo. He hands Magoo the pistol and says, if she tries anything, waste her. As Magoo forces Chris onto Chino's bike, we see Cowboy twitching a little, but no one else does. And the gang rides off, with Chris forced to hold on to Chino's abdomen.
Cowboy wakes up and yells out to Chris. He stumbles down to the water and washes the blood off his face. Meanwhile, the Black Souls ride on. And now having cleaned himself up, Cowboy hops onto his bike to go look for his lady love. While they're riding, the Black Souls like to show off by riding no-handed.
While they're riding, Chris tries to signal a passing motorist for help to no avail. They see her and tell her not to try any funny stuff. As Chino's riding by, he ends up passing the place where the Black Souls and Chris are camping by the side of the road. Mouth, Kasem, sounds very different than what we're used to, as he sings the praises of the cheap wine he's guzzling. Magoo compliments Cowboy's tastes in old ladies, and Mouth calls her uptown stuff. They debate whether she's a mama or not. And what's a mama, Jeff?
A mama doesn't belong to any one man. She's passed around the group.
I didn't know that, so that's why I let you define it.
Chino says that she can't be a mama. He's never seen a mama who looked like that.
She's very pretty.
Joanne kneels next to Chris and tells her that she knows how she feels. She'd feel the same way if anything ever happened to Chino. Anyway, she'll get over it. Chino joins them and also tries to cheer up Chris. He tells her he's sorry for her loss, but there are a lot of good men out there. In fact, there are a lot of good men right here. Chino holds Chris's chin and tries to get her to smile. Joanne asks Chino what he's trying to pull, and Chino says, I was just trying to be friendly. Wow. Joanne takes Chino aside and reminds him that he's her man, so lay off her, okay? And Chino pushes her away and tells her to flake off.
Chris can see that this does not bode well for her. So as Joanne and Chino scuffle, she sneaks off. She's instantly discovered as missing, and the gang chases after her as she books through the brush. The five lose her for a bit, then split up to find her. It's Monk who first spots her, but she breaks free from him. He calls out to the others. Chris runs into Magoo, who starts assaulting her immediately.
Paul is next to make the scene, and he tells Magoo to let her up, but Magoo pushes Paul away.
The others arrive and watch him assault her for a bit. Then Chino tells Magoo to stop, and when he doesn't, he picks Chris up, but now Magoo wants to fight for her. Chino takes him out easily, despite their size difference, as Joanne holds a knife to Chris's throat.
Chino pulls Joanne's knife away from Chris's throat and, grabbing Chris, explains to the others that she ain't no mama, so anyone who tries anything with her will have to answer to him. Meanwhile, Cowboy rides up to a couple of bikers who are drinking beer in front of a building. You guys seen any Black Souls? He asks. Oh yeah, them guys, we passed them about an hour ago. They went that away.
At the place where the Souls are camping, Chino is trying to spoon-feed disgusting cold baked beans from the can into Chris's mouth, talking to her as if she were a spoiled toddler. She kind of acts like one, understandably refusing to eat the garbage on a spoon. Paul says she might eat if they untied her hands, so she could feed herself. Joanne bitterly says, let her starve. He hands her the beans, but she smacks the can away. I keep going on about this because I hate baked beans, and so I feel like she's a kindred soul now. Chino gives up and sits next to her and rubs his gross beard on her. The others, except Magoo, laugh.
Joanne's eyes shoot daggers at Chris. Chris isn't appreciative of the softness of Chino's beard, and she pushes him away. Chino tells her he's going to let her go. She looks at him, and he corrects himself. He's not going to let her go, he's just going to let her go. He does so, untying her wrists, and then climbs on top of her and starts nibbling her ear as she struggles beneath him. The other Black Souls silently watch, and Magoo licks his lips.
We get a brief shot of Cowboy riding his bike, then back to the assault. Chris gets a hand free and strikes at Chino. He clocks her, and she's out. Chino tells Mouth to tie her up, man. Joanne goes over to Chino and offers herself up as sloppy seconds. Chino takes the offer, and they do it in the dirt next to his bike in front of everyone.
Early the next morning, Cowboy is sleeping under a tree at the side of the road, his Glory Stompers vest draped over him like a blanket. Another older biker rides up. This is Smiley. He asks Cowboy if he's okay. He looks like he tangled with a bumblebee.
That's what I wrote.
Smiley introduces himself and says he himself used to ride with the Stompers. Cowboy stands up and says, yeah, he's heard of Smiley. He was vice president of the San Francisco chapter. Cowboy introduces himself and explains his predicament. Smiley asks if this girl has long blonde hair and if there was a dark-haired girl riding with them. Yes, says Cowboy. Have you seen them? Smiley says he saw them turn off at a canyon about 15 miles back last night before sundown. Cowboy says he's covered that canyon already. Smiley says they must have gone off the road.
Now we're back at the Souls camp, where Chris is starting to come to. Luckily for her, she's alone there with Paul, the most reasonable hoodlum. She's still wary of him, but he's sympathetic and cuts her loose and rubs her wrists. He gives her coffee and a handkerchief to daub her bloody lip. He apologizes for her predicament and asks her name. Her name is Christine, but everyone in the movie calls her Chris. He says he's Paul, a.k.a. Clean Cut. Chris wants to know why Paul's with this bunch of animals, and he drops the bomb that he's Chino's brother. They're all alone now in the world.
Chris asks Paul if he thinks Chino will let her go, and Paul says sure he will. When, Chris asks. Before he can answer, Chino and Joanne ride up. I'll find out, Paul promises her. Chino tells the others everything's set to drop off Chris tomorrow at a ghost town outside of Puerto Rosarita. They'll get some money out of the deal, and they won't have to worry about Chris talking should she be found because her new possessors will keep her so doped up she won't be able to talk.
Joanne wonders what they'll do until then, and Chino says, as planned, they'll go to the Love-In at Dome. Joanne reminds him that the Stompers will be there, but Chino says they'll keep Chris hidden. Besides, the only Stomper they've ever seen is dead, haha. Chino goes to Chris to explain the situation.
They have high-class Mexican friends who are willing to take her off their hands, so they agree to sell Chris to them. Chino tells Chris that if she's giving them any hassle, though, he can waste her right there, so she can take her chances with the high-class Mexicans, or Chino can put her out of her misery right there. It's her choice. Then Chino tells clean-cut Paul to untie her ankles. It's time to ride. Paul does so and assures Chris that everything will be all right. Just do what he says.
They ride out, this time with Chris on Paul's bike. Lucky for her. Now we're with Smiley and Darryl at the Black Souls camp. They're gone, of course. But their fire's still warm, Smiley says. Smiley reckons they're headed west, and Darryl wonders how they missed them. Smiley thinks they took an old farm road instead of the freeway. Cowboy wonders if they turned Chris loose, but Smiley can't tell.
Meanwhile, the Black Souls ride on. Since Chris is now riding with Paul, Joanne has been able to reclaim her place behind Chino. She licks his ear.
Ugh. Where the trail out of the woods meets the road, Smiley and Darryl discuss where the souls might be headed. Smiley mentions the big to-do at the Dome, and that they'd be stupid to go there, so they probably did, and then they ride on.
After a while, Cowboy needs to stop. He seems to be having trouble with his bike's carburetor as the Black Souls ride on.
Cowboy, not really fixing anything, asks why Smiley left the Glory Stompers. Smiley says he realized he wanted more out of life. Stompers are losers, Smiley declares, and one day Cowboy will have to ask himself if he wants more out of life too. Darryl is reminded of his conversation with Chris.
Then we cut back to the Black Souls, who are still riding down the road. Back with Cowboy and Smiley, Cowboy has finished doing whatever he decided he needed to do to his bike. Smiley asks if any other Stompers might be coming through here, and Cowboy says no, it wasn't on their schedule. Then Smiley asks if Cowboy minds getting his head busted up again. Cowboy tells Smiley he's free to split if he doesn't want to come, and Smiley said, "Who said anything about not coming? I just wanted to know if she's worth it." "She's worth it," says Cowboy.
And now we're at the Love-In at Dome, where the chicks and cats are dancing.
There's music, there's dancing, there's a band consisting of Ramones cosplayers, and a Jeff Goldblum lookalike sitting in the tree, shirtless but wearing a cape, gleefully watching the proceedings.
And someone's cracking poppers. There's a crackling sound throughout. Bodies are painted. A pervy guy crawls among the women's legs, and Pony and the others are there. Apparently, he and his girl, Doreen, got hitched. Congratulations.
Doreen has chosen to cosplay as Barbie for this party. Meanwhile, the Black Souls are off-road, and they're deciding who gets to go to the Love-In and who has to stay and watch Chris. Chino nominates Joanne to stay. Joanne says that's fine. She pulls out a knife. She'll be in real great shape by the time you get back, she says. "Just come with us, man. Just come with us, man. Just come with us," Chino shoos her away and calls out to Clean Cut.
He always says things 3 times. Chino nominates Clean Cut to watch that slut until they return from the party, and he'll make it up to him in Mexico. Chino tells Paul to keep Chris tied up and don't go messing with her. As they leave, Paul contemplates doing something stupid.
So Chino, Joanne, Monk, Mouth, and Magoo head to the Love-In,
where random scenes of debauchery are already in progress. Men try to strip women riding on the shoulders of cyclists. Boobs are almost flashed. The souls join the fray, reuniting with old buddies. And Magoo tries picking off unavailable women, unsuccessfully.
Some of the souls are dressed up for the occasion. Joanne is all in black, and Mouth is donned a top hat. We cut away to see that Cowboy and Smiley are still riding on their way to the Love-In. Now we're back at the Souls camp, and Paul is building a fire. Chris notices a crowbar sitting with one of the bikes. Paul brings over a cup of coffee to Chris and says he's sorry he can't untie her, orders from Chino. You're afraid of him, aren't you? She says. No, says Paul. Then why not untie me? I just can't, that's all. He gives her the coffee. She takes it and says he's very good looking. Has he ever been in love? Yes, says Paul, once. She says being tied up hurts her shoulders and she leans into him. He starts kissing on her and she tells him to stop and please not be like the others. Paul apologizes and says, you know I could take you. You could, says Chris, but wouldn't it be better if I was willing?
He asks about Cowboy, and Chris tells him that it was over with Cowboy. Cowboy tried to start something up, but she turned him off. Then he asks her to prove it, and they kiss again. At the Love-In, there's a girl fight. Jeff Goldblum enjoys this fight from his vantage point in the tree. And now we're with Pony and Doreen. Doreen is running and stripping all the while, and Pony chases after her. She finds a lake and goes in nearly nude. He catches up to her, takes off his vest, and joins her for a frolic. Still wearing his jeans.
And back at the party, Magoo is hitting on another girl, but she shuts him down, calling him gruesome. Mouth and Monk come up laughing. Maybe you'd do better if she was tied up. Magoo pours his beer over their heads. The guy in the cape in the tree sees potential prey as a girl walks by. He jumps from the tree, but misses her and hits the ground with a thud. And we see that Pony and Doreen have returned to the party.
Magoo wanders off back towards their camp, where Paul is kissing the still-bound Chris. He's really into her. She claims to feel the same and asks to be untied so she can make love right. He asks if he can trust her, and she says yes, despite her reaching for that crowbar all the while. He does free her hands as Magoo gets closer.
We see Magoo continuing stumbling back to the camp, and then we go back to the party, where Mouth and Monk are talking to Pony, and they ask him if he'd like to make some money. Pony is interested enough to hear what they have to say. Mouth tells him that he can take his old lady and sell her, just like they're doing with the one that they took from a stomper after they bashed his brains in. They're getting $1,000 for theirs. At this bit of news, Pony slugs Mouth. Monk asks what he'd do that for. "'Cause I'm a stomper," says Pony, and then he punches Monk as well.
And then the Love-In becomes a hate-in as a melee begins. The Black Souls observe but do not participate in the fight. Soon the cops are there. Moments later, the cops arrive, busting up the party, or trying to, as the gang start pelting them with empty, I hope, beer cans. The cops are grossly outnumbered here. A lot of people start leaving, including the Black Souls.
And back at the campsite, Magoo has returned and sees Paul on top of Chris. "Hey, you cheating? I seen you. But that's okay as long as you share her with Magoo. Chino doesn't need to know about it." Paul tells Magoo to go back to the party, but Magoo wants his turn with Chris. Paul grabs the crowbar to defend her, and Chris just takes off running. She jumps into a creek. Magoo goes after her, and Paul goes after Magoo. Paul and Magoo face off, but suddenly Chino appears with his gun. Chino yells, "Cut it!" He pulls Chris from the water and tells everyone to get on their choppers and ride out. This place is crawling with heat.
There's 3 cops. And now Darryl and Smiley are here. They get to the Love-In, or what remains of it. Everyone is crashed. Doreen wakes up and calls for Cowboy, and then she tries to wake up Pony. Cowboy wants to know if they saw Chris. Pony says no, but me and Doreen got married. Cowboy backburners that and asks if they saw any Black Souls. Pony says yep, and then puts it together that they have Chris and are taking her to Mexico to sell to a rich Mexican. He remembers they're headed to Puerto Rosarita.
"That was Chris they were talking about?" asked Doreen. Darryl asks how much of a head start the Souls have on them. "About 4 hours, says Doreen. Darryl and Smiley start off, but Pony says he's going with them. So they ride off, Doreen on the back of Pony's bike. They ride, as do the Souls, over sand dunes, through the desert, as the sun is setting.
It's lovely, really. Smiley, Darryl, and Pony are far behind the Souls, who have now driven off the main road, riding to that ghost town they mentioned earlier in the movie. Chino commands the others to tie Chris up as they get ready for the drop. A bound Chris sleeps next to Mouth. Magoo is drinking alone, and Paul is pacing. Then Magoo gets up with intent. I don't know if we ever mentioned this, but when Chino beats up Magoo earlier in the movie, he kicks his eye in, and he's only got one eye for the rest of the movie. Or it's swollen up so bad you can't see the other one.
Chino is laying against his bike, trying to enjoy a joint, when Joanne comes up. Chino tells her she's supposed to be watching that chick. Joanne tells Chino she's fine, and she tries to be affectionate, but he tells her he just wants to get loaded. Later, she tells him. Get loaded later? What does that mean? But Joanne wins this argument and drags Chino off to a nearby building.
Then we see Magoo stumbling about the ruins. Cowboy and the others are still on their way. Magoo frees Chris's feet and drags her off at knife point. Paul sees them in the distance and hops on his bike to give chase. After yelling, "Magoo!" as that echoes through the canyon. This takes a minute, but he catches up to them. Paul, on his bike, drives past Magoo, swings at him with a chain, but misses. He turns around and passes by again, but Magoo grabs a big rock and throws it at Paul's wheels, knocking him down and pinning his leg under the bike. Paul screams.
Magoo revs up his bike, then runs over Paul. Then he turns around and does it again. Meanwhile, Chris runs off with her hands still tied. Magoo looks back at the carnage he's just caused and laughs. A voice yells out, "Magoo!" It's Chino. Chino shoots Magoo in the forehead. Chris looks back, but decides the best thing for her is to keep running. Chino runs over to Magoo and unloads the rest of his gun into him, and then Chino goes over to his fallen brother. Nearby, Cowboy, Smiley, and Pony are approaching.
Chino drapes himself over Paul's body to grieve ostentatiously. Joanne tries to offer comfort, but he throws her off of him. Smiley, Cowboy, and Pony are almost there, and Joanne decides to track down Chris, blade drawn. Mouth and Monk arrive, and Mouth tries in vain to wake up Paul, then tells Chino, "He's dead, man."
They try to get Chino to calm down. Joanne hears the sound of the approaching bikes and shouts out a warning. Mouth and Monk try to convince Chino to leave. His brother's dead and there's nothing they can do about it. As the sound of the approaching bikes gets louder, Chino gives his brother one last look, then he hops on his bike.
Cowboy and the rest ride in. Cowboy and Chino ride at each other on their bikes. It's time to play chicken. They collide like medieval jousters, and both are thrown to the ground.
Cowboy grabs Chino, and the two of them fight, while Mouth, Monk, Smiley, and Pony look on. Joanne watches too, from a distance, holding her knife.
And though I thought Joanne was looking for Chris, she's not. She's there with Chino and Darryl. She tries a windy wagon wheels trick knife toss, but fails to hit Cowboy. She does, however, toss the knife right into Chino's carotid artery. Oh, she's really sorry, though.
Chino groans and falls to the ground as Joanne screams Chino and runs to him. A now untied Chris comes out, followed by Doreen, who must have untied her. She runs to Cowboy and they kiss, just a few feet away from Chino's dead body, with Joanne crying over it, and Mouth and Monk standing by, looking very confused. Smile and Pony exchange awkward glances as Doreen joins them.
And then we see the credits in kaleidoscope vision, always a treat. And that's the end. Welcome back to the American International Podcast, where we're talking about the Glory Stompers from 1967.
According to Chris Noel in the book Filming the Glory Stompers, which she co-wrote with Kirk Kimball, Jody McCrea told Ed Big Daddy Roth, the legendary custom car designer and creator of the Rat Fink and Weirdo characters, that he wanted to direct a movie, and Roth suggested that he move on from beach movies to biker movies, which at the time were a novel trend in film. Roth gets an artwork credit in the film, but for what is unknown. One account we read stated it must have been for the jacket emblems of the various motorcycle clubs, while the authors of the book say that it's the red, white, and black artwork seen on the posters and lobby cards for the film.
The title of the film comes from the heavy boots that motorcyclists wear, which are often called Glory Stompers. The film was originally written by James Gordon White as a Western, but was rewritten to be a biker film. It was shot in just 2 weeks with a starting budget of $10,000.
The film was shot in Bronson Canyon in Griffith Park, Panamint City Ghost Town in Death Valley National Park, the Franklin Canyon Reservoir in LA, the Spahn Ranch, and in Pasadena. There are no interior shots at all in this movie.
The path that Darryl and Chris walk down by the lake is the same one used for the intro to The Andy Griffith Show from 1960. It's situated next to Franklin's Canyon Reservoir of the 600-acre park in Upper Beverly Hills. The boulders that Andy and Opie pass are still there, but have been rearranged and reoriented around the area.
Terry the Tramp, longtime president of the Vagos Motorcycle Club, taught Dennis Hopper to ride a bike for this film. Chris Noel said that she and Dennis Hopper were romantically involved during the shooting of the Glory Stompers.
She goes into a lot more detail in that involvement in her book.
And on-set photos show Jim Reeder canoodling with Saundra Gayle.
In an interview with Quentin Tarantino, Dennis Hopper claimed that this film was his first real directorial effort, in that his behavior drove director Anthony Lanza to quit, after which Hopper ended up directing the film. However, in Chris Noel's account of what happened on set, this is a bit of an exaggeration. Lanza said, "I kept falling behind because Dennis kept wanting to play the soundtrack back, wanted to listen, hear how he sounded, or check what he looked like, or whatever. He was doing a good job, though." Lanza ended up going to producer Norman T. Herman to demand that he control Dennis, or else Lanza could not finish the picture.
Screenwriter James Gordon White also clashed with Hopper, who he said was perpetually stoned to the point that Gordon dubbed him Grasshopper. Hopper argued with White about the script. "Well, it wasn't my fault," Gordon said. "We had to change it for budget. I had a much fuller script, but we had to tone it down for budget."
Hopper did assemble the main members of the cast in Palm Springs 1 week after Lanza had wrapped shooting and filmed some more footage out in the desert there, including shots of both gangs riding their bikes on the highway. However, Noel does not know which of the scenes that Hopper shot, if any, made it into the movie. The book's authors speculate that any scene featuring a lens flare is from the footage that Hopper shot.
Jody McCrea said that Hopper was an enfant terrible at times. He wanted to direct, and it worked out for him, but it was hard on the rest of us. You're not supposed to take the wheel from the guy who was the captain of the ship, but our director was more of an editor, and he wasn't strong.
The love-in scenes were shot after most of the movie had finished filming, due to budgetary problems. After running out of money, the producers shopped their film around, according to James Gordon White. He said, quote, AIP was doing motorcycle movies, and they said, if you have a motorcycle thing, to show it to them. So they looked at it and liked the Western idea, end quote. According to Lanza, American International came in and said they'd put up the rest of the money and release it for us. This enabled them to shoot for another week, and that's when they went to Bronson Canyon to shoot the love-in scenes.
The producers recruited local members of various biker gangs, including the Gypsy Jokers and the Hells Angels, to appear in the scene. The only problem they had with the gang members during the shooting was an isolated knife fight between two rival bikers, which didn't keep Lanza from getting all the footage he wanted.
Chris Noel worked as a radio disc jockey with a regular broadcast on Armed Forces Radio called A Date with Chris in support of the troops in Vietnam. She paid several visits to them as well. She was officially adopted by the 15,000-member U.S. Army 1st Infantry Division during one of her stops over there.
The Glory Stompers is the first credited feature film for Kasem, who played Mouth, who was a well-known DJ on KRLA in Los Angeles at the time.
Bob Tessier, who played Magoo, was also a stuntman, and for a time portrayed Mr. Clean in television ads. Dan Haggerty, TV's Grizzly Adams, performed some of the stunts on the Glory Stompers, though he received no screen credits.
AIP released a soundtrack album from the Glory Stompers, featuring the theme song The Stompers Ride by Eddie and the Stompers, as well as music by Davey Allen and the Arrows, Max Frost and the Troopers, and even a song by Kasem. The Stompers Ride was inspired by the Wild Angels theme and produced by Mike Curb.
In Jack Bradford's September 1967 syndicated Hollywood Reporter column, he wrote that Kasem, quote, felt he needed that motorbike role so badly for his image, so he talked himself into the film The Glory Stompers. Then his work began. He had to learn to ride the bike, which included running into the back of a car, riding through a plate glass window, then learning how to stop the dang blasted thing.
The national release date for the Glory Stompers was November 22, 1967, but it didn't reach Boston until December 5th, and the New York premiere was on March 27, 1968. When first released, it could be seen on a double bill with films like Mondo Tino, aka Teenage Rebellion, or Thunder Alley.
Taglines for the Glory Stompers include, Days of Screaming Wheels, Nights of Reckless Pleasure.
It's the Black Souls versus the Stompers Cycle Gang War, and a new kind of violence is born.
Straddle your hogs and ride, man. The Black Souls versus the Stompers in the deadliest gang war ever waged.
Howard Thompson in the New York Times wrote, The Glory Stompers, the latest little motorcycle jamboree from American International Pictures, turned up yesterday on various circuit double bills. This one is just about rock bottom, with two gangs of filthy, lecherous young animals, the Glory Stompers and the Black Souls, all white, warring against each other with time out for orgies. The grim irony of this trash is the contrast to the pretty pastoral backgrounds.
Box Office Magazine said in its review, the picture will bring shudders of horror from adults and shudders of excitement from teenagers. The events which transpire, however, do not encourage this type of life. In fact, it should be a lesson on what such antics can lead to. The love-in staged by both gangs and the rape attempts on the captured girl are frankly handled, but there are no bedroom scenes and the dialogue is weird rather than rough.
Marjorie Adams in the Boston Globe wrote, I really don't know how Chris Noel as the kidnapped blonde heroine manages to remain technically intact considering the many men who have foul designs on her person. But the mistreated mama is eventually rescued by her boyfriend and presumably goes off into the peace and quiet of a life away from the Glory Stompers and the Black Souls alike. She added, the audience this week is mostly young, mostly male, and more appreciative of the violence than of the happy ending.
Brainerd Platt in the Dayton Journal-Herald wrote, as long as Hollywood continues to turn out films like The Glory Stompers, the boys and girls on motorcycles will have a hard time living down the unsavory reputations they have been getting. About the only thing good in this picture is Mahoney's explanation to McCrea concerning his reason for leaving the motorcycle gang. They are born losers.
Joan E. Vadabunkur, in her Syracuse Herald Journal review, wrote, so now there's good guy motorcycle gangs and bad guy motorcycle gangs. It's what spurs the action, such as it is, in the Glory Stompers. She then commented on the acting, saying, Jody McCrea, big, burly, and bashful, is acceptable, even if he can't really act. But Chris Noel, around whom the story revolves, whimpers, whines, and gives a breathy Marilyn Monroe imitation as the girl who McCrea loves and loses to the rival unwashed gang. She's not worth the trouble she causes.
Ouch. California PTA magazine, who reviewed the movie's content for parents, titled their review The Glory Stompers, and wrote, "There's nothing new in this latest film in the series revolving around gangs of unwashed, long-haired hoodlums who race their noisy motorcycles over the highways. They stop now and then for brutal gun, knife, and slugging fights, and to assault girls. Much of the acting is amateurish." The review came with the warning, excessive brutality and stupid.
White recalled, "It's not a great work of art, but it made a hell of a lot of money, and it got me an exclusive contract with AIP. To my knowledge, I'm the only one who was ever under contract with American International as a writer."
Director Anthony Lanza recalls that we had a lot of good actors on the picture, and they did the best job they could under the circumstances. Oh well.
In Sam Arkoff's autobiography, he wrote that in 1968, Dennis Hopper brought the idea for the film Easy Rider into their office. Arkoff said he and Jim Nicholson were concerned about the down ending of the film, but they wanted to make it an AIP project, and even advanced Hopper and Peter Fonda some cash and budgeted a further $340,000 for production, a lot for them at the time. But Hopper said he wanted to direct, and the AIP bosses said no, they wanted Roger Corman, a director with a proven track record, to helm the production. Arkoff said at that time they didn't know Hopper had directed some of the scenes in The Glory Stompers and considered him a novice. Even so, Arkoff said he could direct on the condition that AIP would replace him if he fell behind schedule. But Hopper and Fonda took their idea to Columbia Pictures and made a deal there, and Easy Rider became one of the most successful and influential movies of the decade. Arkoff called this missed opportunity one of the few mistakes they made over the years.
Just a few. The Glory Stompers was selected by Quentin Tarantino for the first Quentin Tarantino Film Fest in Austin, Texas in 1996. So about the Glory Stompers, Jeff, a lot of negative opinions on the reviews. I couldn't really find anything positive in my search. But I was wondering what you thought of the movie.
Well, what really struck me about this one is that the story is just really, really simple.
Yeah.
There's not much going on here. In fact, a lot of the movie is made up of the party and just seeing people partying or riding bikes on the road.
Yeah, you take that away and there's not much to it.
You got maybe 20 minutes of film time here.
It just occurred to me that it's kind of like Pee-wee's Big Adventure, where one guy is getting his possession back. This case, it's a girl. In Pee-wee's case, it was a bicycle. But that movie made it a lot more interesting along the way, and The Glory Stompers doesn't really attempt to do that for us.
No, The Glory Stompers works more of a kind of a slice of life for the biker lifestyle, I think.
Is it realistic, though?
I don't know if it's realistic, but that's what it endeavors to do.
So the lawlessness, the debauchery, the attempt of rape all the time.
Everything people want to see when going to a biker movie.
I guess. And the riding, of course. You want to see the bikes. There are some pretty cool bikes, I have to admit. I just don't know. I think there could have been more to the story.
Well, it's an old story. There's nothing really new about the story, except the way that it's told. As we said, that it was originally written as a Western, so you can see that it plays out anywhere. In this case, it just happens to be in biker world.
I guess you could compare it to Flesh and the Spur, only if Smiley was also the bad guy instead of helping Cowboy, where they had to go chase down that gun and get the guy who killed his brother.
Yeah, it's the hero trying to get something that he's lost, and that's a very, very, very old story.
But in this case, Cowboy didn't do anything to Chino. His own girlfriend killed him accidentally and hilariously, honestly. So Cowboy didn't really do much of anything, except he finally caught up with the gang at the very end of the movie.
And he was outnumbered, so they probably wouldn't have won if Joanne hadn't been so helpful.
Well, by that time, they'd killed Magoo, who was probably the worst of the Black Souls. So I don't know if Monk and Mouth would have been much help against Pony and Cowboy and Smiley.
Oh, I forgot Pony joined them, yeah. So there's at least three of them there. Doreen would have stood back. She wouldn't have thrown a knife.
She might have taken out Joanne, though. You never know. She could have been tougher than we thought.
She was dressed in that pink suit. I don't think so.
As far as the acting goes, I don't know why that one reviewer was so hard on Chris Noel, but gave Jody McCrea a pass. I thought Jody McCrea was horribly miscast in this movie. He has no presence like that. He's wonderful as Deadhead in the Beach Party movies because he's kind of a big dumb jock. There's not a lot going on upstairs. But here you want somebody with a little more edge to them, and he has no edge. But it was his idea, I guess.
Well, he wanted to do a starring vehicle is what it comes down to. And he was told, do a biker movie, don't do another beach movie, which makes sense. But you're right, he doesn't really fit the part.
He would have been better as Pony, and somebody else could have played Cowboy.
Yeah, but if you're doing a starring vehicle for yourself, that's not what you want to do.
No, but you should have the acting chops to pull it off if you're creating a movie just for your own ego. He just has no gravitas. His voice is very...
Hey, everybody.
Yeah, it's so...
Gomer?
Yeah, he's very Gomer Pyle here. Maybe Barney Fife at the worst, but he has no presence.
He's got height.
Yeah, he's a big guy. He's got the build. He just doesn't have the gravitas for this.
Well, we saw him in Operation Bikini, and it was a smaller part. But he didn't play the dumb guy in that. He was just one of the guys. He was taller because he is, but there wasn't anything that really stood out that made him not fit in.
No, he fits into a group, but he's not a leader. And here he's the de facto leader of the Glory Stompers.
No, he's not. He's just a Glory Stomper.
No, I thought the idea was that he was in charge of them. That's how I interpreted it anyways.
They never really said. I didn't get that impression. I just thought he was just amongst them. And
no one else is really a character except for Pony amongst the Glory Stompers. And Pony seemed to be second in command to Cowboy.
Well, that's just because they're only two characters that we know.
Right, but if there was a boss, wouldn't we know who it was? I would think we would. That would be the character that joins him. So I just took Cowboy for being the leader. And he's the tallest, so that always helps. I thought he and Chris were like the prom king and queen of this group. So it just seemed to me they're the most likely to be the power couple here.
Oh, maybe you're right. But it doesn't really matter in the scheme of things.
No, it doesn't. And I can see why you didn't think he was the leader, because he doesn't act like a leader.
Well, he's not leading anybody. He just goes off on his own. And then
right.
Smiley joins him. He's happy to have the company. I mean, he's lucky to have the company because Smiley seems to know a lot more what's going on than he does.
Yeah, he could never have pulled this off on his own. So he's really an ineffective leader. But I thought Chris Noel was fine. She is a little breathy in her delivery, but I thought she did okay with the part that she had.
Yeah, she doesn't have a whole lot to do except be in distress most of the movie and
fight off rape attempts. But mostly she gets lucky because someone else fights the other person off for her.
Again and again. Yeah, somehow she manages to go the whole movie without being raped.
That's what that one review says. How did she remain technically intact? That was a funny way to put it. The actress who played Joanne was really good, though. I thought she had a lot more going on than most of the characters did.
I would agree with that. There is a lot going on there. She gives Chino this look of jealousy and anger and, as I said, staring daggers into him at one point.
And threatening to kill Chris if they left Joanne alone with her. And they took her seriously, so obviously...
Just come with us, man. Just come with us, man. Just come with us.
Then what about Dennis Hopper in this movie?
Well, I enjoy seeing Dennis Hopper in movies. I didn't always feel that way. The first thing I ever saw him in, I think, was Blue Velvet, which I believe I had seen after he did an appearance on David Letterman or something like that. And I was thinking, this guy's just weird. And I stand by that. But as time goes on, I really enjoy seeing him in things. And this is no exception. It's not a great performance, but it's very Dennis Hopper.
It's a big performance. He's a lot in this movie. I think the first thing that I remember seeing him in, and this is terrible, but it would be Speed. Pop quiz, hot shot. In that movie, he never really did anything for most of the movie, except be threatening. But he was really threatening. Like, I was scared of him. And I was scared of him in this movie because he's so unhinged.
He's unpredictable.
You don't know what's going to happen next. He could have done anything.
He might nuzzle you with his beard.
Ugh, that was just disgusting. He might force baked beans into your mouth. Ugh. Of all the people in this movie, he was the only one who seemed like a real biker. I didn't really take Casey Kasem seriously or Bing Crosby's kid Lindsay seriously as bikers. They were kind of comic relief. And Paul, the brother, he shouldn't have been there. He should have been a middle manager somewhere.
Yeah, he doesn't really fit in. And they gave him the name Clean Cut so that he knows he doesn't fit in, but he has nowhere else to go.
Right.
He's just hanging out with his brother.
He could have gone into the army or to college or something. Trade school? I don't know. He had options. He just wanted to be with his wacky, weird brother.
And they don't really dwell on it. And I didn't think of it till just now, but it is kind of a shock to think that those guys are brothers.
They don't look alike.
They don't look alike. They definitely don't act alike.
No, they didn't seem to be raised in the same house. Half brothers I would buy. Full brothers, not so much.
And the character of Smiley, who was Jock Mahoney, we had seen him once before. He appeared in California. He was the lead in that.
Yeah, I didn't really recognize him. It's only 4 years later, too. California was 63, and this movie was 67.
Yeah, but a lot happened in those 4 years.
I guess. He was seriously old. But maybe they aged him a bit? I don't know. He looked rough. He was just the wise Indian guiding Cowboy on the path. He didn't really have a big role here.
It wasn't big, but it was important because there's no way Cowboy would have figured this out on his own. He'd be riding all the way to the East Coast wondering whatever happened to Chris.
Chris. Yeah, you're right. They needed somebody to be the Tonto to his Lone Ranger. It was weird that there were no interior shots in this movie. They shot everything outside. I thought that made it a lot more realistic.
Yeah, I didn't even realize that until
it was in the notes.
Until it was in the notes, yeah.
I wonder if that saved money. Although they did overspend the budget that they had, but $10,000 isn't a lot.
If you're comparing it to The Wild Angels, the first biker movie, the interiors there seem out of place, really, if you think about it, because there's a scene in the hospital. It doesn't look like a real hospital. And there's a scene in the bar that they hang out in the chapel toward the end. Is probably the only one that actually looks like it belongs there. And then when Loser dies and they take him to Mama Monahan's house, that house was just weird looking, but I guess it probably fits with what we know about Mama Monahan. So,
well, I think part of the problem is that there was a lot of people in that house and it looked really claustrophobic because of all the biker guys and gals that were stuffed in there. So it didn't seem like a real house. It just seemed like, a way station.
Well, that's one thing that the Glory Stompers is claustrophobic.
No, you're out in the open highway. I thought the scenery was really beautiful for some of the shots. When they were riding through the sand dunes, it was lovely. And the ghost town scene, it was a real ghost town. And I thought they used it well. They were all over the place there. And I thought that was a very effective use of a natural space. But the movie itself, I think I like it more now than I did initially. When I first started watching it, just the first time Jody McCrea opens his mouth, I just was like, oh my God, we're in for trouble here. But looking back on it, it just seems like silly fun rather than ghastly awful.
The Glory Stompers is kind of a weird title for this film because I wouldn't say the Glory Stompers are the main characters. The lead, sure, it's Jody McCrea's gang, but since Jody McCrea is more the Lone Ranger and not part of a gang, it's not really the Glory Stompers, but you don't want to call it the Black Souls, obviously.
No, but they should have. I mean, it would have made sense because it's a threatening name and they were a threatening gang. And most of the action involved them.
Most of the movie involved them.
For a long time, all we see of Jody McCrea and Smiley is them riding somewhere.
That's all they do is they ride while the Black Souls are actually doing things. If we wouldn't have a movie if it wasn't for them.
Right.
We would have a travelogue.
Exactly. So, yeah, I don't know. I think the Black Souls might have actually worked better. But they wanted to do that motorcycle boot reference, I guess. I don't know. Maybe they should have had a different gang name. That would have worked better as a title.
Yeah, maybe the Black Souls could have been the Glory Stompers. It still fits. It's not as dark as the Black Souls, but Glory Stompers still is not a positive connotation.
No, they're stomping. Oh, yeah.
They're stomping on glory. I mean,
how dare they? Yeah, I think you're right. I think that would have been a better switch. Although calling Jody McCrea a Black Soul would not have fit in any way. They could have been the G. Willikers or something.
Well, they probably could have gone with Angels, except that had already been taken, so it would have been seen as too copycat. But something along those lines would have fit pretty well, I think.
The white hats, the white helmets. They didn't seem threatening at all. They were just aimless. They didn't want to get jobs and work 9 to 5 and live in suburbia. They wanted to ride.
They wanted to party.
Right, all the time. But they weren't robbing people or raping or looting and pillaging the way the Black Souls were. So they're ostensibly the good guys.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's put a grade on this movie. Using our AIP scale, A awesome, I intermediate, P pathetic. What do you give the Glory Stompers, Jeff?
Well, as I said, there's not much to the story. It's very simple, but it's a classic story because it's told over and over and over again and has been told over and over again for millennia. And it's filled out with a lot of footage of people partying and doing weird things at a party and riding bikes a lot. But that was enough that I really enjoyed this movie. I mean, I'm not going to go into a biker movie expecting anything really heavy, and I certainly didn't get it here. The stuff that they used to fill the movie, the partying and the bike riding, is actually fun to watch. I enjoyed watching the Black Souls ride no-handed because that's something a kid would do on a bike, and I thought it was kind of silly. And the party is just amazingly goofy. You got that guy sitting shirtless in a tree staring at everybody.
In a cape.
In a cape.
He wasn't sitting. He was clinging to the side of the tree.
Well, he's kind of stooped in there, but...
It was really funny. They were playing chicken with a girl on a guy's shoulders and riding around. It was just goofy.
And then there was that guy who was just writhing on the ground, and freaking out about something, and
Bad trip.
it wasn't important, but it definitely got your attention for as long as it was on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
And this movie is really kind of silly. I think we're lucky that the character Chris made it through unscathed, and it probably made it a better movie than it would have been. And I enjoyed it enough that I'm going to give it a reluctant A. It's probably not deserving, but I like it, and I'd watch it again. What are your thoughts, Cheryl?
Kind of similar. I'm surprised how much my initial feeling for this movie changed over the time that we watched it the second time and kind of combed through it more thoroughly. And we didn't mention this, but this movie was actually really successful for AIP. They made good money on this. It didn't cost that much, and it did well at the drive-ins. So a lot of people wanted to see this movie, and I can kind of see why. It is silly fun, but for a biker movie, there's not that much mayhem. One thing I didn't like about The Wild Angels is the rape scenes, which were not fended off. And here, Chris, like you said, she wasn't happy to be kidnapped, but she wasn't violated. And that's good. And so in the spirit of that, and the general silliness of Dennis Hopper's performance and the love-in at Dome, I think I'm going to give it an A2. And it's not a stellar A. It's not an A+, great movie, but it's an enjoyable movie. It's not that long. You don't feel really dirty, like you need a shower after watching it. You kind of leave with a smile on your face. I think I especially like the spectacular way in which Dennis Hopper's character, Chino, was killed. You'd have to see it for yourself, and hopefully you can. But just the fact that it was his own old lady tossing a knife willy-nilly at the fray, him and Cowboy fighting, and getting him straight in the neck, right through the, like I said, the carotid. It's hilarious. It's so funny. And then she just has a big my bad look on her face, like, oh, I didn't mean to do that. Are we supposed to be horrified? I don't think so. I think we're supposed to be delighted, and I was. And this movie itself is kind of delightful in ways. So yeah, I think an A is deserved.
What it comes down to is this is a bad movie, but it's one of those that's so bad that it's good. There's a lot of silliness here, and it's not a parody at all.
No.
It could have easily been a parody of biker movies the way it plays out, but it's not. It plays it straight. It's just so darn silly that you can't help but enjoy it.
No, and I think that might be down to Jody McCrea's personality. You know, he's a kind of a goofy guy in every role he plays. And so maybe he just wanted to bring some of that to this movie.
Well, I think Dennis Hopper's overacting does this movie a lot of favors.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
If it wasn't for him, I don't know that this would be watchable, actually.
No, of course not. No, and it wouldn't have been bankable either.
So if you'd like to let us know how wrong we are on our opinions of Glory Stompers, you can always contact us via our website at aippod.com. Also, over there, you can listen to other episodes of the podcast. You can watch trailers from the films we talk about, see lobby cards and posters, and get information that you aren't able to access on an audio-only medium.
So check it out. For the American International Podcast, I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And I'm Jeff Markin.
And we'll meet you at the drive-in.
Follow the American International Podcast on Instagram and Letterboxd at AIP_pod and on Facebook at facebook.com/American International Podcast.
The American International Podcast is produced and edited by Jeff Markin.
A man whose mind is distorted by hatred.
And Cheryl Lightfoot.
A girl hungry for too many things.
The American International Podcast is part of the Pop Culture Entertainment Network.